Welcome to Woke's Mystic. I'm your host, Frater O.D. I'm here with always enigmatic and amazing Old Bear, Uncle RS, and we have a guest speaker today, Rowan Nornsson, who's here to share with us the plant matter. We're going to be talking about plants, the practice of working with plants, and the poison path. As I said in the first go-round, a lot about this show, Rowan, has been a labor of love for the community to bring on new voices so we can get away from all the same voices that seem to, what's the word? Soak up all the juice, so to speak.
Oh, yeah, kind of permeate, take up all the space, all that good stuff.
Permeate, pedestal, there's nothing wrong with it, right? People have carved out their niche, they carved out their social circles, and that's awesome. But one of the things I wanted to do with this show is bring on people with a little bit of a different perspective. Somebody who may not be a top flight 10-book author or have their own podcast, to give them a voice. And just to go ahead and give our listeners a little bit about what makes you, Rowan Nornsson, the plant guy.
Well, one, thank you for having me on, both of you. Very lovely, very warm, welcoming environment. It is such a treat for me to kind of come out of my little dryad, cave, so to speak, stepping out a little bit. So, for the most part, I tend to teach about plants and their virtues, and oftentimes through a very animist perspective. Since so many times in online spaces, I will see people talking about connecting with plants, but never really going deeper into what that could look like. It's almost talking about it like a one-dimensional idea. Whereas, I am of the belief that plants are individual spirits in their own right. If you can have animal guides, who's to say you can't connect to a plant like a spirit guide, which I do, as my little rant about birch earlier very much states. I'm also an herbalist, so I'm very much engaging with that side of things as well, carefully with a lot of science and evidence-based, always trying to be very careful with that, of course, as well as being a practitioner of the craft, and of course a very feral local pagan.
Hey, feral is good. Feral
very
is
much
good.
So. Very, very much.
I think everybody here will, I think everybody here is very tied into that primal current as is. I tend to come from that animistic background. I got to really big into core shamanism when I first stepped into this side of the pond, and worked a lot with shamanic journeying is just spectacular. As far as a practical element, if you have not gone on a shamanic journey of any kind, please do yourself a favor. Look up some nice drumming videos. There's so many on YouTube. They're not all good. Or listen to Heilung, right? Get yourself a drum even. I've got one around here somewhere. Where is it?
There's something about playing the instrument itself.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Yes, absolutely. I'm pro all of this. Amazing.
We are going on a journey today. Perhaps we could someday, but I love this one. It's got a nice, rich, earthy tone to it, and it's a constant companion for me. But that animism is so vital too. I think it's so great. It really helps us connect to the plant itself, to the spirit of the plant, to the medicine of the plant. And why don't you share with us a little bit more about how you got connected with this plant current, if you will?
Oh, plant current is actually a beautiful way to kind of describe what I do. So thank you for that. I'm taking that nugget with me. That is excellent. It's interesting because for the majority of my time as a practitioner, not that I avoided working with nature, but I kind of kept sidestepping it because initially, whenever I was starting out, I tried going immediately into the esoteric, basically chaos, magic, etc., demonology, that side of things, which, don't get me wrong, amazing. I honestly would argue I am the practitioner I am today because I started there and then worked backwards, if that makes any sense, where some people start with the very nature aspect and then go the other way. I just decided, hey, I'm going to flip this and do it opposite, which is a very common thing I tend to do, which is incredibly frustrating for any mentor or elder I have spoken to.
But you're in good contrarian company here then.
And that's why I've been so excited, because it's like, finally, right? But as I started getting more and more into it, it felt very second nature, which I would argue connecting with nature itself is something very easy for a lot of people, but we don't do for whatever reason. And then, of course, I am a very, mercurial, mental kind of jackass. So trying to get out of that was more so what made it difficult, because again, nature communicates very differently than man does. And so initially, whenever I kept feeling that, like, whenever I've mentioned using myself as like a dowsing rod to figure out like where I'm supposed to go, I could tell something was communicating back, but it wasn't how a human would. And that was an adjustment all in its own right. It's like it was more of a feeling rather than a thought. And so, of course, I was like, oh, I hate this. I have to feel things. No.
Ah, gross.
God. Rip out my heart with garden shears now. But the more I got into it, it's ironic I say that because Rose is one of my main plant allies. And as you know, incredibly heart-centered. And every time I've been like, oh, well, maybe it's this thorny thing. And it's like, no, you softy. No. Exactly. My main plant allies, of course, to use examples, are chamomile, rose, and the birch tree. So as much as I kept to be like, try to be a big Billy badass, being like, yeah, thorns, poisonous plants, roots, all these things, it was like, you little bitch. You soft bitch. Open up already. But it's in
that must have
embracing
been hard.
Oh
that
my
must have
God.
been hard facing that. Because a lot of us spend so much time developing the bark, we forget about the heartwood. See how I turn that?
That my ego took a hit as well, which is part of it, But it was a necessary ego hit. And of course, plants hold those contradictions better than humans do. It's like there are some poisonous plants, for example, that have been used in like labs to make medications. They
almost all of them.
Exactly. Like foxglove, for example, digitalis, has been used, and I can't remember its exact name off the top of my head. I apologize. I do have ADHD. Has been used in a heart medication, but it can also kill your ass dead. So there's something kind of, I guess, when you choose to go down the plant current that is personally healing, at least for how I've gone about things, it's like, oh, how can I be deadly, but also like a softie at the same time? There's a plant somewhere that's going to understand that contradiction better than you do.
Plants are remarkable that way. They simplify things for us. I mean, because they live so simply and yet so interconnectedly with each other that there's a lot of lessons to learn when we can tune into it. And that is one of the things that I've always valued about working with plant allies of any kind, is they're a really good mirror for us. Really good at seeing the roots of our problem, to use the almost a dad joke metaphor there. See the roots of our problem.
Literally, yes.
We like to cover that shit up, don't we? We like to cover it up with all this stuff around it so that nobody can see what's actually going on beneath the surface. Just look at my flower. Don't look at what else is going on here, and don't perceive me.
You literally, it's like, I'm going to hide behind these thorns back here. Don't notice me. Don't look over here. I'll fucking get you.
A lot of us are very much like that, and being able to enter into a relationship with plants affords us an opportunity to look at how we're being in the world, right? Animals do this too, and that's one of the great things about animism. Even stones, rocks, whatever, even in this technomantic world, we can see it through our computers, through our devices as well. But it's that specific way of looking at the world that affords us that opportunity to look at ourselves and say, how am I choosing to show up today? How am I choosing to be in this space today? And but plants, for some reason, and I don't know if it goes back to the mythology of it, because how many of the mythological stories, we come from trees. Like almost all of them, it feels like there's some story about how humans emerged from a tree or came from trees or intrinsically linked to trees. It's not any of the other plants that come up in the stories in the same volume, at least not in my own study. Maybe I'm wrong. Somebody out there, you can correct me if you want, but
it's the internet. They will.
Well, of course, good luck. But this idea of us coming from plant is really interesting to me. And I don't know if that's ever shown up for you in the way that you've studied and worked with plants, but just thought I'd share.
Oh, no, I love that. I've always viewed them as, because there's a quote, because it's kind of a side tangent, but I promise it matters. There was a class I taught on the 9 herbs charm. Like, it was a series I did for 9 weeks, and then the final course was me reading the entire thing out loud. But in my studies, I found a quote that was not all ancestors are human. And so there's been an interesting sense whenever I worked with certain trees, certain plants, where it almost feels like an ancestral feeling, a more familial type one. Which adds to that softening up, I think, that I've mentioned previously, because now you're interacting with something that is not only older than you, it predates you, but it's also a part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of sense of coming from trees, that can be, like, again, the creation aspect, and there's the ancestral aspect.
Mm-hmm. And there's also like the fruit bearing. There's like all this feeding cycle. Trees do the feeding. And we were talking about before the show, the symbiotic relationship with oxygen and carbon dioxide definitely ties us in with trees. And if you start considering like the mycelial network, everything's connected by that. So thanks, fungi. You plant, animal, what are you thing?
A scary poor thing that we don't know what it is.
But it's so
changes.
awesome. It's
The moment
so
we
awesome.
think we know it, it changes.
It's the trickster spirit out in the wild, be like, "Ha, I got you."
You thought you knew me, but you don't.
I have not gone more into the mushroom kingdom, and I'm a little terrified. I eventually will kind of branch more out into that area of study, but I just kind of looked at it being like, fuck. Like, trees already rocks my shit. Now we're going to go more into that area of things. Fantastic.
We have a thing that we call the Washington Shuffle up here, where you go over into the middle west side of the state, shuffling around looking for shrubs. Thing, because they grow, the psychedelics grow wild and free in the forest up here. So
I'm sure you get a lot more than just them too. You get everything. You probably get turkey tail, agricon, all of that. I love the mushrooms. They're so fun. I have a blend of like 10 of them that I put in my coffee every morning. Make me strong like bull. But yeah, the mushrooms and the plants, there is some plant matter in that blend too. I think there's ashwagandha, and there's some other things like that, some other nootropics that help out. But yeah, so there's the healing element, there's the more esoteric hidden element, and then there's that very dangerous element that you're talking about, and we'll get to that later in the show. You have an apothecary too, right? I noticed that. Tell us about what are you doing there?
So it's basically just this rickety bookshelf that I managed to put together the best I could. I got mad and finally just picked it up and went, here, and just put it up because I spent an entire day. I had my own man moment, if you will, because I didn't have the drill. I was just doing my best by myself, which I'm very proud of. But it's been in development off and on since 2019.
Okay.
So this has been kind of an ever-evolving, never going to be done, of course, project. And it's a lot of herbs I've collected. Granted, I would love to go out and forage some eventually. I have. They're, drying. But it's kind of, when we talk about the idea of sacred space, a lot of people envision like a classical, like, altar, right? But for me, it's my apothecary. Every time I've gone up to that shelf and I've been like going through looking for something, I feel my headspace change without fail every single time. And usually I'll go looking for one thing where I think, okay, this would be perfect, but end up I'll feel something kind of go, hey, me. And again, usually I'll think, okay, that was fucking weird. I'm going to ignore that. And then again, it's like, down here, dumbass. And it's usually like something that's actually more effective and actually more in line with what I was looking for. But it goes back to that body dowsing thing. Where I tend to feel either like what I call like a warm pulsing or like a, hey, I'm trying to get your attention right now. When you get out of your head, I'll be right here.
Right.
And that's usually how I've connected the strongest with certain plant allies, is it'll kind of be like, hey, when you're done, I'll be here, but take your time figuring it out.
Enjoy the rough waters while you figure it out.
Oh, yes, every single time.
Plants are blunt like that, I find.
Yeah.
They're not mincing words, and they're not sugarcoating anything for us. They're like, hey, here's the message. Are you going to take it or not?
Literally. Yes, 100%. Especially if you work with any plant governed by Mars, which I do quite a bit. Stinging nettle and yarrow are two plants I work with quite a bit, but they feel very different, and they're both very painfully blunt in very different ways. Yarrow I would more put as defensive, which is more on the protective angle of, hey, you should probably strike back now. This has been happening for a while. You need to set stronger boundaries and deal with this situation. Whereas stinging nettle I would put as offensive. It's like, if you don't get that motherfucker right now, I swear to anything listening. Because think about it, nettles like sting. Like when you go to grab it, it's going to get you. That energy very much carries over to how it is as a plant ally. Especially both, like, even within herbalism, it's been used as a natural, like, antihistamine. I've given it to people who are dealing with allergies, etc., and they've been like, holy crap, that knocked the crap out of me, but it worked. And I'm like, yeah, that's what it does. Now imagine what it does as a spirit. You're welcome. And I would love to connect with more Venusian, like, elements, like with Rose, etc. But no, any plant governed by Mars or Saturn, without fail, is always like, hey, why don't we be friends? This is a threat.
Is that how you tend to categorize when you're working with them? Do you categorize by planet and element and work with it within those the constructs of that paradigm?
Mostly what I'll do is I'll meet the plant first and kind of have the initial interaction. And then let me clarify what I mean by initial interaction. Since for the most part, I would love to have a living specimen to meditate with, etc., but that's not always possible. I live in an apartment in like the city, so it's sometimes kind of difficult to get a hold of. Some things don't grow in my area, and trying to garden and source something. I'm a minimum wage worker who works odd jobs constantly. I unfortunately don't have as much spare time as I wish I did. So what I'll usually do is I'll sit with a dried version of it, either kind of engage with it through the senses first. I'll typically see like what kind of scent it gives off and what that usually registers with me. If I'm able to touch it safely, this is where, the difference between the more healing aspect versus poisonous attack kind of comes in, because the rules are going to change when we talk about that in a second. Or I'll make a tea out of it, and then just kind of mindfully sip it while I'm engaging with it to kind of see how that feels. And then finally, I'll just kind of meditate with it and want either its dried herb form or in its tea form, and kind of just see where it goes from there. Because I'd like for it to introduce itself before I start investigating it from a paradigm perspective, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that tends to be how we categorize after the fact more often than not is, hey, well, here's these, what is that? 11 different category buckets that everybody else in magical world understands. If I say it's Venusian, somebody else will understand what I mean by it's Venusian in some way. But we all tend to put it in those buckets anyways, despite the fact that it's normally a wibbly wobbly thing that doesn't really want to be in a box. But
Yarrow is also connected to Venus, which is part of why I use it more in, I guess, loving protection, which, for a lot of people who are parents or guardians for people, or even a partner understands this as differences. Whereas nettle, this is, oh, you're going to get fucked. I had a different
way
to put it.
Connects with Venus.
Oh, yeah.
You said Mars and Venus have a tendency to connect quite a bit. So.
Oh, yes. Where one is, the other's present very quickly. I'm like, I love this for y'all. I really do. And using rose and nettle together in a working once was insane.
Oh, I bet. And yarrow, too, is a dream herb as well. Rubbing it on your eyes before. I mean, don't get any of the plant matter in your eye, but
you can make a tea out of it and then do so.
I just have to clarify for people who are just
this is why I don't talk about plants on the internet usually, at least in video format. Or I think you may have seen some of my posts. They tend to be a bit vague. That's insanely deliberate, because I know if I try to go more complex, there's going to be one idiot in the comment section that's like, oh, so I can do this. I'm like, I'm not going to be responsible for you going to the hospital.
I think one of the issues in dealing with the poisonous plants, the healing to the toxic, people don't understand this. Like working with a dog. You can work the dog and train that dog until it's got enough. It's only going to put up with so much garbage in a day that it would rather be doing something else until it nips you. That's how it's going to
bite. And that still doesn't mean safe either.
Bingo. That's and people don't understand that at all.
Oh, I get mad. I've had to put my phone down and walk away and just scream a few times.
I don't tend to leave those conversations. I tend to get banned.
I want to speak up more, but it becomes a weighing of, okay, do I want to spend my energy doing this today? Do I have time for that? And then there's the rare
conflict.
I have so much respect for you, because there's points where I'm like, I want to get so mad and then stew for the next 3 days. I can't do this.
It's never a good use of your energy to argue with somebody online. It's never worth the time.
Damned entertaining. What are you talking about?
It can be.
But I don't get angry. That's the thing. People don't understand. I sound all kinds of fire and, pissed off. I don't get angry.
You have digital resting dictone. It's digital resting dictone. When you text it out, you just sound like you're a dick. Like,
I've
in
never
real
heard
life,
that's
in my
awesome.
voice. You didn't hear a resting dictone?
No, I never heard
it's because I made it up.
That's
because
cool.
I have this tendency to be told, like, are you grumpy right now? I'm like, no, I'm not grumpy. This is just how I talk. But,
No, it's funny. I get that quite a bit about my face, because there's times where I've been genuinely nodding and paying attention, but I either look disgusted, annoyed, or just stoic. Even if I'm highly invested, but unfortunately my eyes react if someone says something stupid and I can't restrain it.
I didn't even get the coffee to my face. Knew that was going to spit on
Sorry.
me. Yeah. I
And
don't do
so,
well
my friend,
stupid either.
it's so, I just kind of have had to be nudged before, like, fix your face. And it's like, what do you mean I'm fine? It's like, you're looking at them as if they're an idiot. I'm like, well, they are.
Just a reflection of what their behavior is. But yeah, so there's a lot online about plants, right? And one of the things that I find the most interesting about plants is the level of misinformation there is about plants, whether it's from a scientific and medical perspective for their use, for healing, or the complete mismatch, all of the different like correspondences that you can find about a
I'm
plant
taking
all
my
over the
glasses
internet.
off for this part of the conversation because, yes.
About to put it down, but
Yeah, no, literally, I was like, as
plant,
soon as you started, I was like, oh, here we go.
it's really difficult to navigate, right? And so, like, if you work with plants in any way, shape, or form, there's so much information that it's very difficult to determine what that plant is going to be good for in a magical working, or it can be, particularly from the perspective of somebody new, unless they found a way to navigate this world themselves. And so I wanted to ask you what you kind of talked about some of your process there, but how does it work from a more mental level with you? When you're going to look and say, put together maybe an herbal for yourself, where you're like, this is what this plant does for me. I assume you have a magical record of your plant.
Funny thing about that, I don't. Um, that's assuming a level of organization. I assume that I have. If it's super, super important, I'll write it down. But my biggest problem is I'll get very into it in the moment. I'm like, I have to take advantage of the fact my brain is shut the fuck down. I have to do this now. Because who knows when I'm going to actually be out of my head for that long, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But my process, yeah,
Okay.
no. I need that kind of like nudge because I'm don't write anything down. I should. I'm unfortunately a very oral tradition type person as well. So when I'm retelling a story, it's very much like from the heart, spoken from the soul, all that stuff. But it probably would serve me better.
That is a method too, you know.
Mhm.
Unk likes to harp on the magical record because it is so vital in so many different practices to navigate how you're doing it. But not everybody does have that, right? Not everybody
Mhm.
has that. But so back to the question, what is it that you do when you're going to work with something you don't know? Where do you go for information? How do you parse it out?
Usually I'll kind of let myself get into a quiet kind of state the best I can and kind of usually go, okay, this is the thing you're going to do. What comes to mind first when you think of this idea? And say, like, trying to provide an example. Say I'm going to do something for dream work, right? That's something I do heavily. Of course, mugwort's going to come to mind first. Why is that? And start investigating further for what that is. Or say I'm beginning into dreams, etc. Is I'll initially begin on going to Google kind of, right? And being like, okay, what herbs do people commonly use for it? And then start investigating those plants individually. Not just under the guise of, okay, this is good for dreams and then end there. That is a
Right.
mentality that is frustrating to me. And I
Uh-huh.
see it online quite a bit. We'll be like, well, this is good for that. I'm like, okay, have you gone deeper than
More than likely, most people don't.
no, and it makes I'm like chewing at the wallpaper in the background because people don't. People will be like, "Oh, rosemary can be substituted for everything," and you will hear me flipping a table in the background. Like, no. Do you know what it actually does besides just being a substitute for everything? That's disrespect to the plant itself too. Just be like, oh, so I'm
Mm.
not actually useful for anything. I'm just a substitute for everything. That's a real great message to send now, isn't it?
Perpetual silver medal.
Literally. Even though I use rosemary, for example, heavily in working for study, for focus, and kind of cleansing as well, but more in the mercurial aspect of things, if that makes
Mm.
any sense. When there's like a lot of mental clutter, I'll start working with rosemary a little more.
Mm.
And I think,
I use it in making holy water every day. That's what I have a sprig that I burn and then douse in the holy water every day, and that's my how I distribute the holy water.
I
Um,
love it.
that's pretty much the only thing I ever use rosemary for, other than in cooking. But as far as a plant ally goes, it's my go-to for the holy water.
Exactly. And this might be a side ramble, but I feel like this definitely applies. There's a lack of curiosity and a lack of creativity, I think, when it comes to that as well. Because I think we're so afraid of it, whereas plants are going to force you to start engaging with that pretty quickly. Because think about it. Many of them expand. They grow outwards. They start kind of, if they're given a chance to go outside of their boundaries, they will. They absolutely look at kudzu. Do I need an example? I need to say that. Or morning glories. Or have you ever planted mint?
Mm-hmm.
That little fucker will take over everything. That's why when I saw a video of a lady trying to do like a kitchen garden, which I loved, but she put mint in with everything else, and everyone commented before I could make the joke I wanted to, which was congratulations on your mint harvest.
I have a couple of those that have taken over my my flower beds. Number one, rocket arugula. If you plant it once, it will be with you forever. It's delicious, it's tasty, it's bitter, it's Venusian, but it just keeps going, and it
Oh yeah,
doesn't stop.
it ain't stopping. But there have been times I've used like certain plants for certain things. Like I've done workings for love, right? Not putting love spells on people. Don't be a fucking creep. But I've done things to attract platonic love, for example. And I've used passion flower for it because when I was reading and studying about it, is one, there are some plants that are connected with love of friends, passion flower and lemon balm being two of them, but can they be used for romantic love? Sure. But another thing that drew me to passion flower when I was studying it, because again, you have to kind of engage with multiple sources on the same thing, and you kind of take different things from different sources to form your own understanding, which takes a degree of curiosity and a willing to venture into it. So I'm a very fiery, passionate person. I think that's kind of clear from...
No.
And I tend to feel things also super deeply to the point I'd hurt my own feelings, right? The thing is...
The truth is, you only hurt your own feelings. Nobody else can hurt your feelings. So.
Oh no, I do it. I do it myself. It's freaking. But passion flower is good for calming passion emotions, but not dulling them. So I tend to go to it quite a bit when I'm being kind of a little crazy. And it's kind of good at taking me from being a gas fire down back to some kindling. It's kind of like, okay, cool, great, you're fiery, you're going off, you feel things on a deep level. Let's kind of bring it back a little bit so you don't accidentally set yourself on fire. And a lot of people would recommend lavender for that, right? They're like, oh, but lavender is calming. I'm like, it also is not going to affect, like one plant isn't going to affect two people the same way. Because I love lavender, I do, but I associate it more with tranquility, not peace and calming the hell down. I use it a lot also, similar to rosemary and study, and like keeping a very meditative headspace. But I also find that take ironic because in the Victorian language of flowers, lavender represents distrust. So, I was like, I'm feeling a little called out right now by all of you recommending lavender to me. How'd you guess?
There we go, talking about that mirror again, right? It's interesting. If you look at any one plant, especially a plant that's really well used, well known, especially in the magical community, there is going to be so much information that it's contradictory all the way through. And so you have to make a determination on what you are going to use it for specifically and kind of toss a fair amount of that out. One of the things I think is interesting, you kind of just pointed out, was the differentiation between calm and tranquil, right? I see this happen a lot with people approaching plants as if there's like 7 fucking emotions we can have. Like, that's it. That's all we have.
No.
We have 7 experiences, and those are what the plants go to. But there's so much more to it. And plants are very nuanced creatures, right? You watch them in concert with other plants and who plays well together, who doesn't play well together. And they have attitudes of their own. And again, it goes back to that mirror of looking at, okay, where am I being, or what am I being like? And then what plant do I know also acts like that? Like cures like, right? So I can go ahead and learn a lesson from a plant that's doing the same shit that I'm doing. So if I'm in the midst of saying what's a good example? I don't have enough money or whatnot. I can go outside and sit with my calendula and say, how are you achieving such abundance out here? Right? What's going on with you? Maybe I can learn a lesson from you. And so on and so forth. But I think it's interesting that we tend to put them in these very limiting boxes that are of a single experience when they're usually a Swiss Army knife, most of them. There's not very many plants that I've come across.
It's we do it to them because we do it to each other type thing. It's like there's no way a person can be more than one thing when, I know we're going to be talking about poisonous plants later, but a lot of people are surprised. I see a lot of, despite, a lot of people come to me for advice or see me as a very calming presence, which is very ironic. I say it every single time when someone's like, I feel so at ease around you. And I'm like, do you now? I'm so glad. Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm a distrustful, like, fiery jackass. I love that. But
it's because you're being honest. That's why they're comfortable around you.
That's
honesty
part
is
of it.
Comforting.
That's part of it. They see your thorns. They realize they're not a threat. And they can probably step behind you, and those thorns will be more effective for them as well. That's what it is.
Woo! Dropping some knowledge.
I love it. But I feel a lot of kinship with poisonous plants. And we'll kind of get more into that as we kind of venture more into that territory. But that's been a huge source of, of course, the traditional healing plants are amazing, but where the good shit really started happening, so to speak, the deep shit, is when I started interacting with the plants tied in with Venevicia. So that's kind of fun.
There are the plants that everybody knows about, but one of the things I like to focus on when talking about plants is your local stuff. What's growing right outside, right? There's so much that grows locally around you that is much more tied in to you energetically when you're talking about your praxis. In the land, it reflects. And I talked about this in another interview recently where I started to have a whole bunch of bindweed show up out of nowhere for no reason. After a couple of seasons of nothing being there, it just showed up and it started taking over most of the garden. And the garden is kind of like a reflection of me, what I'm going through at the time. And I realized, oh my gosh, this is Dionysus coming through. This plant is an ally of Dionysus. This binding vineweed that's just coming in is a direct correlation to the workings that I'm going through. And so instead of forcing it and saying, I want this in my life, I want X in my life, I got to go get this plant and work with this plant that's not actually growing anywhere near me. Sometimes it's easy to take a step outside in your local environment. What's going on out there is a great indicator of what you could work with right now much more effectively. I don't know if that's the same case for you.
Oh, for sure. And depending on where I've lived, certain other plants have just shown up, like yarrow, for example. I didn't start working with heavily till I moved where I am now, and turns out yarrow grows abundantly around where I'm at. Trying to find it has been difficult, but knowing multiple people have been like, yeah, I found yarrow out here, and I just kept hearing it out of nowhere, and it kind of announced itself before it showed up, and it was kind of like, hi. I know I couldn't physically arrive, so I sent a couple of, texts, if you will.
Getting texted by a plant.
Yes. Another one I've connected with heavily since moving out is plantain, actually. And
okay.
yeah, I found it while I was hiking. I found an abundance of it. And it was just kind of, I found one, I was like, it's kind of nifty. I looked up, there's just a shit ton of them. It was just kind of like, hi, here's the rest of us. Hi, we're all here. So I was like, all right, that's cool. And of course, speaking on hiking and going foraging, which was such a lovely experience. It was with family. It was super great. So already the headspace was just fantastic. I kept passing this log and I kept feeling something going, hey, I'm down here. Hey. And I kept trying to keep walking because I didn't think initially it was anything. I was like, okay, that could just be my mind doing what it's doing, whatever. And then finally I felt like the only visual I can give you is like, when you try to put two magnets together or you're trying to hold them apart and there's still that pull. I was feeling that as I was walking away and I'm like, okay, what are you? I turn around and I kneel in front of this plant and turns out it's catnip, which is another plant I work with rather heavily, both because I have a feline companion, of course, so I keep some really good apothecary quality on my bookshelf for him, but I also use it in teas as well. It was really good for gladdening the heart or AKA lightening the fuck up. That's basically been that plant since I met it. It's been like, can you smile for 10 seconds? Is that hard? Is that hard for you?
It's painful. It hurts.
And I kept just fucking giggling when I found out. I was like, oh, wow, you yelled at me. All right, you're coming with me. So, I don't know. It's kind of been different things depending on where I've been. And inadvertently, of course, when I've started doing research on that plant, it turns out that I'm in its home. And it was kind of like saying, hi, welcome to the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, there is. We are in their house more often than not. I mean, our houses are literally made out of the bones of them. So it's like, we have a direct. Yeah, you might as well pay attention to them because we're living within the plant world. Pay attention to those messages because they're often helpful to you. Specifically, again, the local stuff. I can't harp on that enough. You don't always have to be working with mandrake. You don't always have to be working with the most rare. I need some henbane. Sure, probably not. But
and that's also illegal in some states too. That was something I had to learn a little bit. Of course, I was doing some digging on some, and I was living in California at the time, and henbane's illegal. So I was like, oh shit. Let me not fucking skirt on the edge of the law, even though that would be really hilarious. It's like, oh, that's what you're arresting me for? It's not anything else. It's like, well, what does he have on him?
Yeah, oh no, not the henbane.
Anything but.
But that's a good segue there. That's a good segue for us to talk about the poison path and your experience working with poisonous plants.
So something I'd like to clarify is I only have a physical specimen of one poisonous plant within my collection because most of them, even just breathing them in, if they're not in an airtight jar, could kill you. or at least potentially seriously harm you. And of course, I have to think about the fact I live with people. I also have animals around. So for the
Mhm.
most part, it's had to be through, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the work of Kobe Michael, the creator
I've
of the Poison Path Herbal. He also
seen the
created,
book. I haven't read it yet.
it's utterly fantastic. Could not recommend. His work is massively influenced on me. But he also created sigils to connect with them, which is what I've used on a few occasions. Because as much as I do have resources to actually source these plants in, and I have friends who grow them, etc., just due to my current space limitations, I'm not trying to send my roommates or me to the hospital. You know what I mean? That's where we kind of venture from the more traditional healing herbs into, okay, we have to be a lot more careful. I plan on getting a lot of tests for these because it's like, I just want to be careful. But
Aw, no fun. No hospital trips.
I know, no cardiac arrest. Awful.
No,
um,
it's interesting that they did the sigil work to connect with them because I remember reading, I think it was Gramasi's book, The Thorn-Blooded Witch, which
okay.
was it's a really good little book where he does a similar thing where he connects you with a kind of a poetic mantra and a sigil with each one of uh the, the more poisonous plants so that you don't have to deal with all of the same things. So it's interesting that that's also being carried over after his death. I know he died a couple years ago, I think.
Oh,
And
wow.
now we've got other people working in that area. That's nice. I like that.
It,
I like
the
that.
tradition carries on type thing.
It
And
does.
interestingly, the idea of the poison path and Beneficium, etc., the term Beneficium itself, I could be very wrong, more so originated with Daniel A. Sulky or Schlucky. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But the idea of the poison path in general came from someone who also passed on, Dale Pendle. He
Okay.
was an ethnobotanist who wrote like a trilogy of books that kind of talked about poisonous plants. Is the Pharmaco series. I can't remember the latter half of the title, but excellent books. I could not recommend them more. But it's kind of interesting because when you start looking at poisonous plants as spirit guides, right? Which is kind of what I started to do. Especially because this is where kind of the heavier part of spiritual journey kind of starts to come in. I'm a survivor of extensive abuse, right? And violence of all kinds, etc. And as much as a lot of your more traditional healing plants have been great at holding space for that, there's something about, like when I worked with belladonna specifically, it's that definition of, yeah, you're beautiful, yes, but you're deadly at the same time. And you can be
Hmm.
both of those things at the same time and command respect and all of the above. Uh, there's just something so personally vindicating through working with heavier energies like that I found just so appealing. And of course, every single poisonous plant has that lesson of you will treat me with care or I will fucking hurt you. And it was just kind of like oh shit, I fucking love that. I'm gonna go this way. I'm going into this camp now, 100%.
Those heavier energies too, they're good at transmutation. They're good at
Oh
taking
yeah.
some of that pain and turning it into strength. Or it's a it's a they kind of, what is it, like jaguar medicine in a lot of the southern American tradition is it will eat the energy and transmute it. So there's a
Okay.
kind of like, if you have something that you're clinging to, whether that be a wound or some sort of trauma that you are unwilling to let go of, these heavier energies will help you in digesting it so that
Yes.
it's no longer something stuck to you, or you stuck to it. It has that way of kind of transmuting it, changing it into something you can work with.
Definitely. And the main three, I guess, of poison path that I'm the most fascinated with is, of course, as I've mentioned, her first, belladonna. Shocker. It's also the most discussed one, and it's popular for a reason. It's also existed in stories and discussions for so long. She speaks for herself. It's also associated with a lot of darker goddesses, for example, like Hecate is heavily associated with her. Many people associate her with Lilith. It's just kind of like any darker or more feminine leaning energy as well. Belladonna is probably corresponding with one of them, but I also like working with it as the individual spirit, like we discussed with previous plants. And then for me, it's also Aconite is another one I'm deeply drawn to.
Yeah.
And that one is a fighter. It is very much a, war energy, which I absolutely love. And the last one is Mandrake, which that's why I was kind of trying to hide a giggle earlier when you were. It's also the one I have a specimen of. Now, I want to make sure that it's actual Mandrake, but from everything I've done and back-checked it, it seems correct. It's like, if you weren't now, you're a species of it, or I'm treating you as such, giving a nod to the Chaos Magician above.
Right, yeah. I mean, most of those samples are the American Mandrake, right?
Exactly.
I have some of that myself, and I have never really found a use for it other than to learn from it. I've never really put it into anything, but it was one of those where I was like, early on when I was really getting into plants, I was like, I gotta get me some of that. Gotta get me some of that.
I wasn't even looking for it when I found it either. It just kind of showed up on its own. It was like, hi, let's see. What do you think? And because it was kind of funny, I don't like always making something out of nothing, because sometimes, it's just a crow going about its day. It's not a sign of anything. But I just thought it was so damn funny whenever I was out with a friend and I was standing near a display and a pack of that Mandrake just kind of went like right next to my leg, kind of like, hi, here, look at me. I belly flop to get your attention. But Mandrake is interesting, one, because of its rarity and all the lore around it. Like, people even sold fakes to try and get a hold of it. And it does so many things. It's used for wealth magic because of its rarity, which I thought was super cool. And that's kind of what I've used it for, in terms of seeking opportunity. It's also been used in love magic because, the roots look like a body. It's also been, used for baneful magic, being like, okay, in the sense of protection. And so having those three kind of energies present in my space, I don't know, it's unique. It's because I have people over quite a bit who are like, I don't know how to describe it. You're heavy, but you feel safe at the same time. Why would you say that? What about that? Wonder why that could be.
It could be all the plant spirit allies.
Definitely, because I kind of bring a group with me. Oh Lord. Well, earlier I mentioned birch, chamomile, and rose. The ones currently, though, I'm starting to bond with more and kind of grow to understand is hawthorn. It's been a big one. Very
That's a hard opener.
Yeah, unfortunately. Take a wild guess. What's the center focus of my craft right now? Hawthorn. Motherwort has always been a focus for me. She pops up on a regular basis. I put her in blends quite a bit for some dear friends of mine who are very heart-centered, nurturing people. One is a preacher who is in an LGBTQ plus affirming ministry and is also a social justice centered ministry. So I kind of put some of that in there because he tends to also run a grief group, very open and support for others. And his wife is absolutely lovely in every way. She tends to kind of like become a mom, like aunt figure for everyone around them. So I always kind of try to sneak motherwort in with everything I give them. Because I heard...
Poison you with motherliness.
It's like, here, this is some protection for the heart-centered folks in our lives, because an herbalist I wish I came up with this on my own. I really did. But an herbalist I deeply respect. Her user on social media is the Twig and Feather. But she mentioned how she uses motherwort in blends for nurses, teachers, parents, counselors, etc. Because unless you're coming in with kindness, you are not allowed to come in at all. That is kind of why motherwort is an herb I tend to return to quite frequently to be totally transparent, for the sake of comfort. I feel like people like to look down on that and say you shouldn't have something that consoles you, but I feel like if more people could honestly do that, we'd have a few less problems. Because sometimes, for Christ's sake, we're all human. You need to kind of have that safe breakdown space. And the third plant ally I've really been into is the elder. More so on elderberry has been one I've been looking into as well. Especially with the transition of the seasons, it kind of pans out super well. So,
how about you, Bear?
I like that you brought up that people need comfort. One of the things that, as a confessor, that I deal with is that specific problem. Because a lot of people feel responsible for things that happen to them, and to some degree, a lot are. But you aren't always responsible. It's still going to leave, if it's something that you didn't enjoy, it's still going to leave you with feelings. So that comfort that you're talking about from your plant-based practice is something that people actually need. And we used to get that in a tribal sense. We used to get that from our peers. We used to get that from our families. We used to get all of that from there. Now, we got other stuff too, but we used to get that comfort. And sometimes all you need to do is have somebody listen.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of people think I'm a very mean person. And that's cool, because I'm brutal. I'm brutal. And when you show me your belly, you better be ready for it. That's all I tell you. But the fact is, I do that because I want people to figure out their stance so they feel comfortable. And if you want to challenge me, that's cool. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is, then if you challenge me, you need to finish the fight.
Thank you. Yes.
And
I could not
that's
agree
what
more.
I see coming from your talk about poisonous plant. You gotta know what you're doing. You gotta pick your interaction. Choose how you want to interact, and then be ready to finish it. That's what I see.
Start nothing and there won't be nothing. Because that's kind of been a big lesson they taught me, is if someone starts a conflict and their backbone isn't ready, destroy them. They started it. Finish it.
Sometimes that's the experience somebody needs. We spend a lot of time in the world coddling each other and making sure that nothing is going to happen to anybody. And that's not the way the world is. There is conflict. There are lessons to be had in our pain, in our suffering. And I don't know where it came from or when it came about, but people have this idea in their heads that we're supposed to be happy all the damn time.
Oh God.
And we're not. We need to learn to be okay with pain, with discomfort, with suffering, to accept it for what it is and see it for what it is. Because often, and again, it goes back to that mirror. It says, what am I supposed to be learning from this that can help me either to avoid being in this same situation again, from this circumstance occurring again, or more so, what can I learn to maybe, I don't know, help another person with it, right? How can I be of service through this, right? Through my own suffering as someone in recovery, it's like, oh, how can I identify when somebody else is going through that same suffering and I can now lend a hand, right? If I hadn't gone through those hard times, then I wouldn't be capable of doing the things that I can do now. And that I think is one of the key things that, again, we talked about it before. Plants give us that mirror to say, hey, this is this is how you can show up in the world. But sometimes, if you've got to finish that fight, that might be some lesson that somebody needs to learn, and that's okay too.
Oh, for sure. And speaking on that mirror, I have oftentimes become the unshakable force meets a movable object. And that's why I also think the inverse of very heart-centered work has become very important in a lot of the things I do, because I've had to turn that off for so long. Yeah. It's a trip. Because oftentimes I've been the person in a situation who's gone toe-to-toe with people who think they can't be moved. And it's like, okay, you try to step all over people and intimidate and dominate the situation. Hi, my name's Rowan, and welcome to Jackass.
Everyone can be moved. Everyone.
Oh, yes. And I tend to be that lesson for people, but I also tend to try and remind people, like, hey, so can I. I learned it first, now here we are.
So now I know where to go to if I need another person to check my ego from time to time. If it's not Unc, I'll just go to Rowan here. Hey, I need a kick in the dick real quick so that I can behave better.
And what's worse is I'm nice about it. I'll do it, and I'll be like, all right, bud, you all right? And my friend was like, what are you just being mean to me?
I'm good.
It's like, can you be mean and not, like, caring and understanding when you do it? It's like, that's my balance. I don't have to be mean to you to get my point across, and I argue for some people that stings more.
Well, we're coming up on an hour of recording here. I don't want to steal too much more of either of your time today. I know everybody's got stuff they want to go to, but I wanted to give the opportunity, Rowan, for you to let our audience know where they can find you online, and if you've got anything interesting planned for, any of your social channels or what else you got going on.
I'm mostly just going about my little, dryad existence for the most part. I do have 2 accounts if you wish to follow and interact with me. I have the Wickedly Wise page, even though the ad is technically Wickedly Cunning, because I switch up on a regular basis, and both technically apply. Wickedly Wise is more of my witchy, educational, rambling side of things, but then there's also my business, which is Wisdom Brews Apothecary. Both are on Instagram. Mm-hmm. Feel free to follow both, and there should be an Etsy shop coming in the near future. It's just trying to get all that together. So
right on, Etsy
pretty
shop.
Much my thing. Yes, I'm also looking to Shopify. I'm just comparing the 2 systems at the moment.
Well, if you, I help build those for a living, so if you need any pointers or any help with any of that, let me know.
Definitely, I appreciate that.
Or
here to help.
Put it on ASOS.
Yeah, we could also help you out there, help you market it a little bit. I like helping out the community and getting their stuff out there, because it's, people get an idea and they're like, I want to share this with the world, but they don't always have the skill set to get it out there. There's a lot of noise out there, and it's just like shooting in the dark more often than not, trying to get people to pay attention to whatever it is that you're trying to do. So I try to lend a helping hand wherever I can. But yeah, this has been awesome. We'll have to have you on again and talk more about plants. Maybe next time we'll pick a specific plant and do a deep dive.
I am amazing at that.
Get real nerdy with it. Get real nerdy with it.
I'm here for it. I'm down for it. And you two are free to reach out at any time. It's been an honor to meet you both, and of course, step into the community a bit more.